Christian, what do you think about the war in Iran?
Are you ready to sharpen one another?
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of All Man's Land. Today, we are going to be a little bit more serious and we're going to talk about what's been going on in Iran. Hopefully, everybody that listens to this podcast is aware of what's happening. But if not, Christian, just give a quick synopsis of what's going on.
Well, for a variety of reasons that the government really hasn't gotten totally straight yet, the United States decided to bomb Iran. We're gonna bomb them. Anyway, whether it be for the freedom of the people who are being oppressed by the Iranian radical Muslim regime, or for varying different kind of political views by Trump not wanting them to have, ballistic missile capabilities or nuclear warheads or, anything kind of along those matters, being the destabilizing force they are in the Middle East right now, funding all of these different terror organizations. They've kind of used all of these as reasons why we've gone in and bombed them. A lot of people believe that we're essentially doing this at the behest of Israel as well, and we're going to get into all of that. So that's what's going on right now. Yeah. So far, we have pretty much entirely decimated the Iranian Navy. Their Air Force is pretty much depleted. They're operating at like an exponential 50% rate every single day.
What do you mean by that? Explain what you mean.
So they're depleting by about 50% every single day. So they're going from, I don't remember the exact numbers, but let's say they started at 500 the first day, missiles launched at everybody else. Second day was like 250, third day was like 125, that kind of thing. So they're swiftly running out of capability. And they've apologized. I think they bombed like 12 or 13 other nations around them that aren't the United States or Israel. Mm-hmm. They've apologized to those guys, to which Trump responded with a swift, "Too late, they're already coming." And now we're just kind of in it. So that's what's going on. And I know we like to make light of it because I like to make light of it because if you don't laugh, you cry. Same. And so, yeah, I'm definitely going to make some jokes at the expense of Iran. But on a really real note, just so this is disclosed at the beginning of this, a lot of people have actually died. Estimates are like 40,000 in the month of February alone were just killed by the Islamic regime that they have in Iran. So a lot of life is actually being lost. I think six United States. Yeah, 6
was the last.
Yeah, service members have been killed. So there is real loss of life, but like I said, anytime, and so we're going to get into this a little bit more, but I am a matter of two minds on the situation. One, I think just being raised in kind of the forever regime change wars of Iraq and Afghanistan, I don't love to see that we're kind of back in the Middle East doing our old stuff. On the other hand, with the leadership in the United States government we have right now, it's kind of refreshing to see, especially after the Venezuela stuff too, that we aren't really pulling punches the same way that, Bush and Obama did the entire time. And so rather than going in there and throwing boots on the ground and putting people in harm's way at every turn and every year, just kind of doing the same thing over, expecting different results, we went in there with the mindset to we're just gonna totally obliterate everything that is there as far as your leadership, and then turn you over to the people and hopefully get out. That's what I'm hoping. If this turns into a whole, W situation again, I'm gonna be pretty upset. So let's get into it, Mark.
Yeah, and I think everybody should be upset, and I want to explain a little bit. Christian and I, there's like a spectrum of people in the United States, at least on the conservative side, which is mostly who we talk to. And on the spectrum, you have the people that say, no new wars. And Christian and I talked about this before. We were both very much in that camp. One of the reasons we really liked President Trump was the no new wars. kind of campaign that he ran on. But however, I must admit that I think I was a little, I think almost naive in saying that, or not naive, but I wasn't as informed as I should be, or I wasn't looking at it appropriately. If you are a world power, and specifically the world power, you can almost, I would argue, if you look at history, you can almost guarantee that you're going to be at war with somebody always. Now, there are moments of peace by the grace of God. There are moments of peace. And we hope for those, we fight for those, we desire those, but it's not always a realistic expectation that if you are a beacon of hope and of freedom, and especially a beacon of Christian values, and Christian and I've talked about whether or not the United States is a Christian nation. I would say that for the majority we are, but not completely. Obviously, that's its
It
own
should be.
topic. Um, we should be.
Total
Um,
theocracy now.
you are you are going to be at war with somebody because somebody's going to hate you. Okay, and so I think it was almost not an unfair expectation, but my support of President Trump does not is not dependent upon the fact of whether or not we are in a war. Oh, if that makes sense. This is a, in my opinion, and Christian and I like 95% agree on this. And in that spectrum that I was trying to explain, you have a line. You have some people that say you shouldn't have any wars, and because President Trump got us into another war, he should lose all support. And then on the other side of that, you have, hey, you kind of have that neocon, like world dominance sort
Yeah.
of view, and both of those things are, I believe, incorrect, and I think Christian would mostly agree with that.
So I think Mark and I would both agree that there is such thing as a just war, and I think that goes all the way back,
Mhm.
at least in Christendom, to Saint Augustine, and I think that's who did it,
Mhm.
if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I mean there are prerequisites that could justify military action and violence.
A
Yeah,
conflict.
absolutely.
Yes. And in this case, the argument is whether or not there was those things. And I am of the mind, and Christian for the most part agrees, and there's nuance, but we are of the mind that Iran has consistently, since the fall of the Shah, right, in 1979, has consistently been a threat to democratic nations, up to and including the United
Hmm.
States. Whether it be funding terrorist organizations, the building of nuclear weapons, which they should have never even gotten close to, their insane arsenal that they have been using against other nations, specifically Israel, and they were consistently a threat to the United
Hmm.
States, and they have taken action
Yeah.
against us. So this is a conflict that should have happened and has happened to differing degrees in the past, but this is a conflict that should have happened, I would argue, and was unavoidable. And I am glad that we had President Trump in office rather than some other people to make
Right.
it happen. And the hope is that we have such overwhelming force and we are so effective at the beginning that we don't need to send boots on the ground for the next 30
Yeah.
years. Now, there's another interesting thing about constant war that I think we should just briefly touch on.
We're
Some
really,
people think that,
really good at it. We've been doing it for 250 years, essentially nonstop.
yes,
Quit challenging us, okay? And especially
right?
stop touching our boats. We're gonna kill you.
Yes. Yeah, it's true. And here's the thing, guys. For those of you that don't know, Bush did not get us into the war in the Middle East. I think there is this idea that, like, President Bush, 9/11, all of this stuff, that he just got us into this conflict that was never going to happen, all these things. No, we have been at war with someone from the Middle East since the founding of our nation. And if you don't believe me, read, I think it's Brian Kilmeade's, is it Thomas Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates book? But look up the Tripoli Pirates. Tripoli, Middle East, Islamic aggression. They were attacking, killing and enslaving our sailors in the Mediterranean. They were destroying our ships and enslaving Americans. This has been a conflict. We have been in conflict with people in the Middle East since the founding of our nation. So this is not something new. This is not something that Bush did. This is not something that Reagan did. This is not something that Bush Senior did, or Clinton and the Gulf War, any of that. Okay, so when people say that, oh, we're just going to get into another forever war, unfortunately, guys, we've kind of been in a forever war with the Middle East since the founding of our nation. There has been moments of peace. There has been moments that that was not the case, but this has been an aggression towards the United States from people in the Middle East since for 250 years
Mm-hmm.
essentially. This is nothing new, okay? And Iran is the latest regime that has been the most aggressive towards the United States and has required action for a long
Yeah.
time. Now, there is more to it. There is more nuance. There's arguments to be made, but this idea that we just did this out of nowhere and we did it because Benjamin Netanyahu told us to do it, that is a false
Well,
flag. That is
and
not true, and that is inconsistent, and it's just a
I want to
lie.
go back to a little bit further. Like, not only has the United States not only been in conflict with the Middle East for essentially the entirety of its existence, every global hegemon has been in conflict with the Middle East, going back at least to the Crusades.
To the Roman
Yeah.
Empire, to the Roman
Oh,
Empire.
absolutely, all the way back to the Roman Empire. But after it split, the Byzantines tried to do what they could for Eastern Christendom. The Pope, that's what the Crusades were, was the Pope calling for Western, Christendom to go help Eastern Christendom fight back the Islamic tirades that essentially took over all the way up to Spain, which is like, that's, the Reconquista and everything like that. But even before that, like every major empire back to Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan fought the Middle East because he sent, if I'm not mistaken, it was like, I think it was like the 1200s. He sent a dude up there essentially to be like, hey guys, we should work together, to like Tehran, and they killed him. And so he sent another one. He's like, hey, I don't know if you got this message, but like, we should work together. And they killed him too, and Genghis Khan decided to raze the entire place to the ground. So people have been fighting with this individual little, breadbasket of Abrahamic religion as an opponent for a long time, especially when the
Yeah,
area is
and
controlled by Islamic regimes. And so this shouldn't surprise anybody, like that
no.
it doesn't coexist. I know that you see the like 2007 Toyota Prius with the coexist sticker on the back that has, the cross and the crescent, whatever. I don't even, what is it? Crescent and a star, the moon.
Crescent
Yeah,
moon.
the
Yeah.
Islamic symbol on it. That's not a thing. The values just simply don't coexist. And so there's going to be conflict regardless.
Yeah. And I think, again, I'm not saying that there's not nuance and that there's more to this story, sure. But we gotta wade through the lies and the prejudices and the preconceived notions and be like, listen, this was an inevitable conflict that should have happened to this degree years
Mm-hmm.
ago. Years
Well,
ago. And it just happens to have been started now. Now, you could ask, well, why did it start? What did Israel have to do with it? Are we just doing it because Israel started something? Maybe.
sure.
Maybe. But the fact of the matter is, this was a conflict that I wish wouldn't have been necessary, but was
Sure. And
necessary.
for a little,
And regardless of why it's, oh,
oh,
go
I
ahead, go
appreciate it.
ahead.
Yeah, no, for a little bit of background on it too. I personally think, and Mark and I talked about this a little bit beforehand, but I don't remember exactly what you said about it. I think Israel is partly to, maybe not to blame, but you can say that they, pulled us into it further than maybe we would have liked
Yeah,
to alone.
sure.
So they were a
Absolutely.
reason that we're doing it, but
Hmm.
I think this had to have been planned for at least a little while. And I think the reason that is because when asked about funding Ukraine, the administration that we have right now said, of course we're going to do it. It's going to deplete a lot of Russia's, munitions. It's going to deplete a lot of the
Hmm.
stuff that they can provide to all these other places like Iran. Iran got a lot of their stuff from Russia, and so while Russia's not only occupied but doesn't have a lot of stuff to spare, it's a pretty good opportunity. That paired with China having not really challenged us a whole bunch in the last few years, as well as all the conflict going on civilly in Iran right now, I think it made it a good time for us to do this. And so whatever
Yeah.
excuse they give, just geopolitically, the stars all kind of aligned. And so going back, like you were saying, Mark, I think that morally we had the obligation, potentially before this to do this at scale. One
Hmm.
of the largest military wins under Reagan is Operation Praying Mantis, where we essentially destroyed half of Iran's navy in like 8 hours by tonnage. The Fat Electrician does a really good video on this, where he talks about exactly what we did over there.
This is a warning. Stop and abandon ship. I intend to sink you. Over.
And it was because I think they sunk, or they didn't sink, they blew apart an American ship, and the crew of the American ship happened to like be able to hold the boat together and limp it to a port. But they hit it with a mine in the Strait of Hormuz, maybe.
Yeah, Hormuz. Yeah, the Strait of Hormuz or Hormuz,
Yeah,
however you
so
say it.
I think that's where it was. Anyway, Reagan retaliated by essentially letting loose the fury of God upon the half of Iran's navy, and then they shot a silkworm missile at us, which they were not supposed to have and were definitely not supposed to use. And we decided to tell them that they were going to say to the world that it was a misfire, and that we would sweep this all under the rug, because at the time it would have likely set off legitimately World War III, just given the geopolitical environment that it existed in. So I think now, with kind of the weakened support structure for Iran, not a lot of allied help for them on their side, now was the best time to do it that we've seen in 30 years.
Yeah. Well, and to be honest with you, and I want to be careful and say this too. This is not a neocon pro-war conflict or pro-war podcast.
No, not at
I
all.
hope we're not trying to come off that way. I don't want war. We want peace, absolutely, but we are also not so ignorant of the fact that there are not just reasons that war
Yeah, put this on the
exists. I mean, and there's a reason why. And I'm gonna read, and I'm gonna look it up while I'm talking right now, a passage of the Bible to kind of go along with what we're talking about. But
put this on the record right now,
the
real
other thing I
quick.
want to
Mark, I
say
need you
too.
to agree with me so that everyone knows that we are
Yep.
not neocon fools. Dan Crenshaw, raise your right hand. Dan Crenshaw and Lindsey Graham suck. It's real bad.
Listen, I like Lindsey Graham sometimes,
No.
but Dan Crenshaw is the most infuriating human being I've just ever seen in just a long time. Let me just read this section. This is submission to governing authorities in the Bible. This is Romans chapter 13. And we're going to start in verse 1, and we're going to read through verse 7. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. Okay? Judgment. For rulers hold no terror for those who do right, but for those who do wrong. So, if you do wrong, you should have terror. You should be afraid of the
Mhm.
government because they are tools that God uses to punish evilness. Do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right and you will be commended. For the one in authority is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid. For rulers do not bear the sword for no reason. They are God's servants, agents of wrath to bring punishment on the
Mhm.
wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to the authorities not only because of possible punishment, but also as a matter of conscience. And then this is also why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants who give their full time to governing. Give to everyone what you owe them. If you owe taxes, pay taxes. If revenue, then revenue. If respect, then respect. If honor,
Right.
then honor. So kind of the give unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. So the point I'm trying to make is there are instances when governments have to wield the sword against
Right.
wrongdoers. Okay. And Iran has been a wrongdoer for a long time. I wish it were not so. I wish that the 6 Americans would not have perished. I wish the people in Iran that are dying as a consequence of their evil regime, the children and the women and all that, I wish they were not dying as a
Right.
consequence to their governments, or to the regime that was what was his name? Their
Ayatollah
leader.
Khomeini.
Yes. I wish that were not so. However, there are consequences, and sometimes if you have a wicked ruler, the consequences will include the suffering of the people under that
Hmm.
government. And that is an unfortunate truth of conflict and of war. And so we wanted to get that out. Now, this leads us into a little bit of a, not an aside, but this goes into the second question of the day. And this is almost the theological question of the day, guys. So, regardless of whether or not Israel is the reason we went to this war, because like we just kind of said, it doesn't matter who got us into the war, it was a war that needed to happen. Regardless, what should American Christians' view be on Israel? And there are two sides to this. Two main sides, I will say. Okay, and it's how you basically view the end times. You either view it through a dispensational lens, which is you view that the church and Israel are separate in the dispensation of the end times, or there is a God will deal with Israel in a different way after the rapture happens, when Christians are taken up to meet Christ in heaven. Or you view it through the lens of covenant, more reformed theology, which says when the church age started, Christians are the new
Hmm.
Israel. So therefore, the nation state of Israel no longer, quote, matters.
Hmm.
And as far as eschatology is, which eschatology is the study of the end times, therefore, we should not be beholden to Israel as a nation. So the question then is again, how should Christians view Israel as it stands today? Christian, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, for me, I've been going probably leaning more toward just because it's more recently what I've been looking into and studying the covenant theology side of things. And the view held, like Mark just pointed out, is that there aren't two separate kind of bodies, that Gentiles in the age of grace, in the new covenant, are, the new Israel. We're grafted onto the olive branch, as it speaks of in what is it, Romans 11.
Romans
Yep.
11.
And so we're all, and the argument essentially is that the root is Jesus, is Christ. And so when we look at the physical place of Israel, we aren't really looking at, a separate olive tree. We're not looking at a separate group of people who God has chosen to preserve physically, by dint of their ethnicity or their lineage from Abraham, because we believe, as Paul says, not all descendants of Abraham are Israel, and that kind of thing. So you get into, well, then what's the purpose of Israel? And I think there are currently, I think there are some reasons to support Israel in the Middle East as an ally. They're just geopolitically and strategically a good position for us to have over there. I think this doesn't mean you have to agree with everything that Netanyahu or the Israeli state decides to do. For instance, I'm actually pretty upset that they just decided to take out a whole bunch of Iranian oil. against the wishes of the United States. I don't love that. But you can criticize the things that the state does, and not feel I feel like this kind of, maybe guilt's not a right word, Mark, for coming from dispensationalists, but or Israel itself,
Mm-hmm.
for not supporting every single action. But this, you're not as compelled to kind of hold back on those types of retorts about Israel, because a lot of people, like you see, like Huckabee's a good example, I think, in my opinion, where it's kind of he kind of resigns himself to, like, everything Israel does is justified no matter what, and that is the simplification, but he tends to err on that side of things, and I don't think that's necessarily a justified thing coming from a covenantal point of view. Now, and I haven't totally made my mind up one way or the other. I'm just, like I said at the beginning of this, I'm leaning that direction because it's what I've most recently read. So recency bias, you can call it that. But yeah, I mean, that kind of sums it up. It's the church itself is the new Israel. That even through the Old Testament, everything was kind of seated in Jesus himself. And so we've all been working from this one goal, as this one olive tree, as Paul puts it. And Mark, I'm going to let you go ahead and give the dispensational point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to make sure I had muted myself for just a moment. The An improper dispensationalist will view Israel incorrectly and will view them as a separate entity in today's dispensation, which all dispensation really means is the administration, how God administers and works with people in a given age. Okay. There are dispensationalists that will say there are two roads to be saved: the Old Testament way, which is through works, and the New Testament way, which is through faith. Okay. That is incorrect. The Bible clearly teaches that faith has always been what has saved, because in Genesis 15, Abraham is credited with righteousness, not because of his works, but because of his faith. Faith always saved. However, God had a different administration through different ages. Now, a dispensationalist will say then there is a dispensation of the millennial kingdom, which says that there are unfulfilled promises of the Old Testament that are specific to the nation of Israel that will be fulfilled in the coming age. Okay. However, a, the temptation that dispensationalists have unfortunately fallen into, at least for a time, was, well, in this dispensation of grace where we just believe in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, we still have to view Israel as a separate
Mhm.
being, as something that needs to be protected. That whole, if you bless Israel you will be blessed, and if you curse Israel you will be cursed. That is incorrect. That is an incorrect form of dispensationalism. Israel, people that are Jewish, have Jewish heritage, are in need of Jesus Christ
Right.
in the same way as anybody else is. Therefore, regardless if you are regardless of whether or not you are a dispensationalist or a reformed covenant theologian, or a covenantalist, however you want to put it, regardless, we should all kind of view Israel the same way, which is until the end times. And we have different views of what the end times look like, but regardless, the nation state of Israel is just and only that. It's a nation of people that need Jesus
Mhm.
Christ. And therefore, you do not have to be beholden to them. When they do something wrong, they need to be held accountable. When they do something right, that's great. This whole idea that we are beholden to everything and anything Israel does and that they are not at fault is not correct. That is bad. I'm going to use a term that a lot of covenant theologians use about dispensationalists. That is bad theology. And you
Mm-hmm.
are correct. That is bad theology. We are not beholden to Israel, regardless of whether or not you are a dispensationalist or you hold to covenant theology. It makes no difference. Because the end times, well, the way I view it, because I am personally a dispensationalist, God brings together his remnant, which is talked about in Romans 9 through 11, and you have this great revival of Jewish people that come to Christ post, or at least during and post tribulation time frame. That's how you interpret Revelations and Daniel, things
Mm-hmm.
like that. And then you have the millennial kingdom, which is when believers will reign with Christ in this millennial kingdom. But either way, regardless of how you look at Israel, or regardless of how you look at eschatology, which is again the study of the end times, you as a believer right now are not beholden to the nation state of Israel. Now, with that being said, I was telling Christian right before we came on, the reason why I am more uh, attached to Israel now is because in the dispensationalist view, we are working towards the eventual rapture of the church, the tribulation, the great revival, the 144,000, and the Jewish nation basically, this great turning to Jesus
Mm-hmm.
Christ. To me, it seems much more, it's closer now because after 1948, you had Israel becoming a nation again. You had, then you later on, you have the capital moving back to Jerusalem. And like the United, and like for example, Donald Trump putting the embassy there, moving the embassy. You have all of these little bits and pieces of the puzzle kind of aligning. The stars are sort of aligning to lead to the tribulation and the rapture of the church. And as a believer, Lord, rapture me. The world is crazy. Let me be with you. And so there is a hope there and an excitement there. That being said, if Israel as we know it, and I'm copying some of the points from a video, which is from For the Gospel, a YouTube channel. I highly recommend at least some of the stuff that I've watched from them. It's excellent. And the video that I'm kind of going off of, and he explained it very, very well. This is Costi Hinn, Benny Hinn's nephew, who has nothing to do with Benny Hinn. He is also a pastor, and it's called Discerning Dispensationalism from For the Gospel. Go check it out. I haven't finished the whole thing, but at least the first, 2/3 of it has been excellent. Anyways, um, it could be Israel could be destroyed tomorrow. It could go back to being Palestine. Okay. That does not change the fact that there are promises of Israel, of the great revival happening, of people coming back to Christ. Just because I am hopeful that the nation that we see right now is laying the groundwork for what Christians call the end times does not mean that it necessarily
Right.
is. And so, all that to be said, whether you are a dispensationalist or a covenant, or you hold to covenant theology, your view of Israel should be the same. They are a nation that is wicked and needs Christ. They need to come to Christ. They can make mistakes, and you are not beholden to them.
Absolutely.
And I hope that kind of helps people a little bit with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's very well put. Um, and I think that, potentially, I think a lot of dispensationalists who, um, because now it's kind of in vogue, the covenant theology, right?
Mm-hmm.
It kind of took back over,
Yeah.
especially in the last 5 to 10 years, from dispensationalism. But a lot of us were raised, myself included, in churches that preach dispensationalism. And I think too many people who were raised in those environments have a very surface level understanding exactly of what dispensationalism is. And so
Yep.
hopefully, people who don't totally want to abandon that view look at or listen to what Mark's saying, and can take that to heart, because like I said when I was talking about covenant theology, like I said about people like Mike Huckabee and these dispensationalists who,
Lindsey Graham
yeah,
is one
Lindsey
of
Graham
them.
is one of them. These dispensationalists that
Ted
Yeah,
Cruz.
Ted Cruz is another. Ted Cruz is like adamant about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
These guys who are, going out and saying everything we do, we must do for the sake of the state of Israel, because the current nation state of Israel
It's God's chosen
is
people.
God's chosen people. And so, like, I just want it to fall on, willing ears, that
Hmm.
you don't have to sacrifice, your nation's interest, if you're looking at it from a dispensationalist lens. In this dispensation, you don't have to essentially simp for Israel all the time. And you can still hold to that belief, that you can still hold to that
Absolutely.
the perspective with which you divide the Bible.
Hmm.
And you don't have to be one of those guys. It's like, well, look, I don't care if Israel is gassing people right now. That's what they got to do to survive. It's like,
It's they're God's
yeah, it's
chosen
like that.
people.
You're
No.
that's nuts. Um,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
wrong.
that's wrong. And so I I even though I am relatively undecided, and even given the bent I have currently toward kind of covenant theology, um, I just I just don't want people to keep making that same mistake because they haven't looked into it.
Hmm.
So if you're wondering about dispensationalism, Mark has some book recommendations from Charles Ryrie that I'm certain he's willing to give. I think there are some good podcasts about it, by Reformation Red Pill for the covenant theology side. I go learn about it. Go kind of try to figure out exactly where you're at. But regardless, do a deep enough dive that when asked a question about it, you can defend what you're talking about.
Yeah. And I think too, one other thing to be careful about in this very highly charged moment right now, especially with the war in Iran, um, whether you're a dispensationalist or you adhere to covenant theology or a few of the other views of how you interpret the Bible, remember that if the person that you are disagreeing with believes in the fundamentals, believes in Jesus Christ, that everything is to the glory of God, that Jesus came and he died and he rose again 3 days later as a propitiation for our sins, and all you have to do is trust in him and in his sacrifice for you and you're saved, that believes that God created the heavens and the earth, that God has an ultimate plan of redemption, that there will be a new heaven and a new earth, and all of these things. Just because you might disagree on the church in Israel does not mean that you are not both brothers or sisters in Christ. And do not let this disagreement drive a wedge between you two, because, and I've listened to people talk about this. I remember somebody asked Dr. Frank Turek about this, about how they're concerned that they are seeing this trend online and with family members where people that aren't dispensationalists are calling dispensationalists heretics. And the other could be said, I'm sure there's cases where dispensationalists are calling covenant theologians and all that heretics. Do not do that. Heretic is a very strong word. Okay? That is very strong. You are calling another brother or sister in Christ a heretic over a disagreement on how to interpret essentially a lot of the end times, is what it kind of boils down to, and how you kind of properly separate the Bible into chunks. You still believe in the same Savior. You still believe in the same God.
Absolutely.
You just happen to interpret the Bible a little differently on issues that are not fundamental. Be kind with one another. Be loving with one another. Be gracious with one another. Disagree. Disagreement's awesome. That's something that we're allowed to do. Paul disagreed properly with people in the New Testament over who should not go with him because he felt abandoned by someone. Paul didn't want to take him. I don't remember who it was. If it was Barnabas, I think he disagreed with Barnabas on whether or not I don't remember. I know I'm probably getting it wrong, but whether or not he should be accompanied with another person on his missionary journeys. Paul didn't want him to go because he was previously abandoned by him. Barnabas said, no, he should be allowed to go. He has repented of that. And this was a proper disagreement. Paul and Barnabas still loved each other. Neither of them were necessarily right or wrong. They were both correct. Okay. And so I think we can view covenant theology and dispensationalism in that vein. So when you're seeing there's a lot of videos online that's like, dispensationalism is false and dispensationalism is bad theology and all this stuff and it leads to bad politics and everything. Like, I understand what people are trying to do, but just be careful because these are brothers and sisters in Christ with a very these views did not just appear out of nowhere. Okay, they were studied by brilliant men who knew what they were talking about, who knew their Bibles. And so be careful is all I want to
Sure.
say. Be
Well, and these things
gracious.
come in waves too. So, early 2000s, it was kind of the opposite direction. There was a lot of the, dispensationalists, I would say, covenant theology's, wrong. It's bad.
Hmm.
But yeah, I totally agree with Mark. So I use this analogy with Mark, earlier in our conversation before we started the podcast about, to me, it's kind of like if Christianity is, let's say, like a Ford, and I drive an F-150 and Mark drives a Taurus, the body of the Taurus doesn't make it not a Ford, And so, whereas someone like, in my belief, like a Mormon chops the front of the car off and sticks a Chevy on the front and then, you know, like a Toyota on the back and makes this like Frankenstein's monster disaster of a vehicle. That's a lot different than saying, you know what, well, you don't even drive a Ford now because yours is a car and not a truck. It's like, well, they're not driving a truck, but it's the same fundamental thing. It's all coming from the same place. It's all the same different, or it's all the same parts. So we don't need to be in constant, calling each other heretics over disagreements in theology. Because at the end of the day, it's the
Yeah.
wrapping around what is essential to making the thing what it is.
Hmm.
And what is essential to making Christianity what it is the belief in the, death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. Believing that, he is the salvation for our sins, and that, from a Protestant view, that we're saved in faith alone. And so that's what's important. And now when you get into these disagreements
Yep.
about, eschatology or how the Bible is to be divided, it's like those are important things to talk about, and they're important things to understand, especially for your own relationship and walk with Christ. But they're not things worth crucifying each other over.
Yeah. So I think we just wanted to get on here and talk about because this is something current, something that's happening right now. There is a lot being thrown back and forth online, especially on YouTube, and it's not only is covenant theology in vogue right now, it's also in vogue to kind of tear down dispensationalists. And I understand that there is a disagreement in theology there, but like Christian just got done saying, we're still believers. And people that are dispensationalists didn't just come out of this with come up with this out of nowhere. I mean, these are biblical giants of theology that
Sure.
put the name dispensationalism. They're not idiots. Okay. And I think people.
I was
Oh,
gonna
go
say
ahead.
Charles Ryrie, I think, is a brilliant thinker, and I may disagree with some of
Yeah.
the things he says, but that's just an understanding at the fundamental level of the text. It's not saying that he's stupid or anything along those lines.
Exactly. Yeah, and so I think we just have to be careful. So, again, just to summarize, we talked about the Iranian conflict and why, at least according to Christian and I, um, it is for the, and I, again, there's nuance there, but for the most part, it is justified, the conflict. We talked about Israel, and that whether you're a dispensationalist or a covenant theologian, your view of Israel should be the same, that they're a nation state that can make mistakes, and we are not beholden to them, because whether or not, again, the church in Israel separated, at least in this dispensation of grace, it makes no difference at all.
Right.
And yeah, and the fact that the difference between covenant theology and dispensationalism should not drive a wedge between believers, and that we should have love for one
Yeah.
another, and we should respect one another, and we should respect each other's views. Because guess what? I've learned a bunch, even though I might be a dispensationalist, whether I'm a traditional or progressive, I go back and forth. I've learned from covenant theologians. I've learned from
Sure.
amillennialists. I love Apologia Radio. I listen to a lot of their stuff, and they are not dispensationalists at all. And so we can all learn from each other, and we all need to love one another because we're brothers and sisters in Christ.
Absolutely.
So keep that in mind, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. This is actually a little bit.
I was literally, Mark, just about to try to extend it a little bit and throw out Second Temple Judaism as like a third leg of this podcast.
Hey, listen, we can end that really quickly. Second Temple Judaism is bad, and it is anti-biblical, and they do not believe in Jesus Christ, and they really do not like Christians, and so it's bad. It is a religion like every other non-Christian religion, and if its foundation is not Jesus Christ, then it is a false religion. Guys, thank you so much for watching. This was one of our shorter ones, and but it was really important, and it was something that we need to get on and talk about. Be praying for the people that are in Iran. Be praying for the people in Israel. Be praying for Americans, all these other nations that Iran is attacking. Just lift them up in your prayers. Pray for those that have lost family members. And yeah, hopefully, and God willing, this conflict is resolved quickly. Love one another. Love your brothers and sisters in Christ. Don't let small differences in theology drive a wedge when you believe in the foundation, when you have the same foundation, which is Jesus Christ. Don't let these other smaller issues drive a wedge between you. And with that, that's all we got. We'll see you in the next
Yep.
one.
And if you want to find us or support us, you can find us at Bloodbot Supply Company on Facebook. Feel free to buy a cool t-shirt because we have some cool t-shirts, and that would be awesome because we're struggling and poor.
Yes.
So help a brother out. Okay, bye.